A young girl lives an apparently perfect life with her adoptive parents, until a buried secret begins to surface. Between hidden documents, forgotten memories, and an inexplicable connection, she discovers the truth may be much closer than she ever imagined. Her real mother is, in fact, the housemaid. Get ready to dive into a story of suspense, emotion, and destiny, where every detail matters and every revelation changes everything. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story will reach. Hannah lived surrounded by comfort. The Reed's house looked like something out of a magazine, with wide hallways, huge windows, and an elegant silence that hid secrets. She had everything most teenagers dreamed of: expensive clothes, constant trips, and parents who spared no effort to give her the best. Yet behind her timid smile, there was always the feeling that a part of her story remained untold. Jonathan Reed, the father, watched everything from a distance, always busy, yet present through discipline. Catherine, the mother, compensated with affection and attention, turning the home into a warm place. Still, Hannah couldn't shake the idea that her life, so perfect on paper, carried an invisible gap. It was as if there was a detail left unsaid, a shadow hidden in the light. Meanwhile, across town, Grace woke early for another day of work. Her routine was marked by the buzz of an old alarm clock, the smell of plain coffee, and the rush to avoid being late. As a housekeeper, she knew luxurious homes, but at the end of the day, she returned to the small room she rented. In her eyes, she carried the weight of a choice made years ago, a choice that still haunted her. Grace's decision had not been easy. Giving up her newborn daughter had been the greatest sacrifice she ever made. Not out of lack of love, but because she believed the child deserved more than she could provide. Since then, she lived with the constant memory of that act, finding what little comfort she could in the thought that her daughter, somewhere, was being cared for. The settings could not have been more different. Hannah grew up in a world of privilege, but with a void she couldn't name. Grace survived with the bare minimum, but kept within her the memory of the greatest treasure she had lost. 2 lives, 2 rhythms, 2 universes that seemed to have nothing in common. And yet there was something invisible tying these stories together, like loose threads in a fabric that sooner or later would weave into one. Every step Hannah took in her comfortable routine unknowingly brought her closer to the truth kept under lock and key. Every silent tear of Grace, every thought of the past, seemed to pave the way for an inevitable reunion. While one searched for answers without knowing the questions, the other resigned herself to a silence heavy with memories. The contrast between them grew sharper, as though destiny itself was building a stage for something grand. The days appeared ordinary, but a greater force was preparing the moment when their lives would collide. This was only the beginning. 2 parallel stories, seemingly distant, followed their own paths. But life had different plans. The lines that ran apart were about to cross, and once they did, nothing would ever be the same again. It was early morning when Grace arrived at the Reed household for her first day of work. The sun streamed through the large windows, lighting up the elegantly decorated living room. Dressed in her simple green uniform, hair straightened and neatly tied back, she moved quietly, almost as if asking permission to enter a space that was not her own. With each step, she carried the serenity and humility of someone who had already known deep pain. Hannah descended the stairs with light, distracted steps when she noticed Grace standing in the center of the room. No words were spoken at first, only a gaze that lingered longer than it should have. In the teenager's eyes was something between curiosity and recognition, as if this unfamiliar figure stirred an echo long dormant in her soul. An invisible thread began to form. Catherine watched from afar, leaning against the kitchen doorframe. Her sweet expression was marked by a trace of unease. She knew her daughter well and sensed that something about this silent exchange was unusual. Grace was not just another housekeeper. There was a certain magnetism in her presence that left Catherine on edge, as though destiny itself were playing a trick. The bond grew almost imperceptibly. Hannah, usually reserved, asked trivial questions about the work, but her tone carried genuine curiosity. Grace responded simply, yet her eyes shone strangely as she observed the young girl. It was as if she recognized something in her that she tried to hide even from herself. As the days passed, their encounters became inevitable. Hannah sought out small conversations in the mornings, followed Grace as she tidied the rooms, and without realizing it, began to trust her. It was a connection that defied logic, a bond growing in silence but heavy with intensity. Catherine, increasingly attentive, noticed the exchanged smiles and the ease with which Hannah gravitated toward Grace. In her heart, a fear was born, the fear of losing ground, of her daughter finding in another woman something she herself could never give. It was a hidden insecurity, but it revealed itself in the wary glances she cast at every gesture between the two. Jonathan, meanwhile, barely noticed what was happening under his own roof. Buried in commitments and paperwork, he saw Grace only as another employee. To him, everything seemed normal. What he did not know was that, in the smallest details, a much greater story was unfolding, ready to erupt into revelations that would forever change his family. Destiny, patient and relentless, was bringing the pieces of a puzzle together, one no one imagined was about to be assembled. Silence carried mystery, and the exchanged glances hid questions that had not yet found a voice. With each passing moment, the connection between Hannah and Grace grew stronger, preparing the stage for an inevitable moment. It was a silent night in the Reed household when Hannah, driven by curiosity, stepped into Jonathan's office. The room exuded order and authority, with dark wooden shelves and meticulously stacked folders. The heavy atmosphere made every step echo like a secret about to be revealed. The young girl took a deep breath, hesitant but continued forward. Something in that place was calling to her. As she approached the desk, she noticed a drawer slightly ajar. That detail stood out in the rigid, perfect environment she knew so well. With trembling hands, she pulled it open slowly and found folders marked "Confidential." Her heart raced. Among contracts and business papers, there was something that did not belong there. A file with her own name. Hannah opened it, and inside lay a copy of her birth certificate. At first it seemed ordinary until her eyes caught a word that changed everything. Adoption. The world stopped. The letters printed in black screamed silently at her, shattering in seconds the story she had always believed was true. The impact was devastating. The paper slipped from her hands, landing on the expensive carpet of the office. Her reflection in the glass window looked like that of a stranger. Suddenly, the familiar hallways of the house felt like a labyrinth of lies, and every happy memory was stained with doubt. The perfection of her life was collapsing before her eyes. Hannah's breathing grew shallow, uneven, and her body trembled under the weight of the discovery. Questions rushed through her mind. Who were her real parents? Why had they hidden this from her? Why so much silence? The weight of the revelation crushed her soul, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. A noise in the hallway snapped her out of the trance. She quickly gathered the file and shoved everything back into the drawer, trying to erase the traces of her intrusion. She hurried out of the office, her heart pounding in her chest. With every step, she felt the walls watching her, accomplices in the secret they kept. Back in her bedroom, Hannah collapsed onto her bed, clutching the pillow tightly. Silent tears soaked the fabric as her mind searched desperately for explanations that would not come. Jonathan's and Catherine's voices echoed in her memory, but now they sounded distant, weighed down with things left unsaid. Trust was beginning to fracture. That night, while the rest of the house slept, Hannah stared at the ceiling as if staring into an abyss. The revelation could not be forgotten nor ignored. She knew her life had just changed forever. And deep inside, one certainty emerged. This was only the beginning of a long and painful search for the truth. It was a quiet afternoon, the silence of the house interrupted only by the soft sounds of routine. Grace was tidying Hannah's room, folding sheets with an almost maternal care. As she worked without realizing it, she began to hum an old song, a sweet melody that seemed to come from a distant time. The music filled the room like a whisper, heavy with memories. Hannah, walking down the hallway, froze when she heard the melody. Her eyes widened, her heart racing. That song was not unfamiliar. Since she was little, she would whistle that tune without knowing where it came from, as if it were a memory never told. Now the melody appeared before her with a tangible origin. With slow steps, she approached the doorway and stood still, watching Grace hum. The young girl's gaze filled with confusion and wonder, as though she were standing before a missing fragment of herself. Each note echoed within her, awakening an invisible bond that grew stronger with every second. Grace, focused, did not notice Hannah's presence. Her face radiated serenity, yet her eyes shimmered as though her soul remembered even when her mind did not. The melody flowed naturally, charged with hidden love like a silent confession that needed no words. Hannah remained frozen, letting the sound envelop her. A single tear slid down her cheek as she realized that this melody was part of her essence. It felt as though someone had lit a lantern deep inside her memory, revealing something that had always been there, concealed in silence. The emptiness she felt was finally beginning to take shape. With each gentle verse, the connection grew stronger. Hannah recognized the rhythm, the cadence, the tone she had absent-mindedly whistled so many times. Now everything made sense. This was not just any song. It was a legacy, a mysterious thread binding her to someone she did not yet fully understand. The atmosphere of the room shifted. The air grew heavier, as though destiny itself were watching the scene unfold. Hannah stepped forward, the faint creak of the floor making Grace turn suddenly. For a moment, their eyes locked in silence, and both felt something inexplicable tying them together. The lullaby stopped, leaving only its echo suspended in the air. The silence that followed revealed more than any words could. Hannah, still too afraid to ask, tucked the melody into her heart. Grace, unsettled, lowered her gaze, unaware that she had just opened the door to a secret that could not remain hidden much longer. In the silence of her room, Hannah could no longer ignore the doubts tormenting her. The document she had found and the lullaby echoed in her mind like riddles demanding answers. That was when Olivia, her best friend, stepped in, always fearless, always ready to embark on any adventure. With her alternative style and vibrant gaze, she brought Hannah the courage she needed to begin investigating. The two decided to search for answers beyond the comfortable walls of the Reed home. On a rainy afternoon, they entered the municipal library, where the scent of old books mingled with the distant sound of rain against the windows. Olivia took the lead, combing through shelves and records, while Hannah followed in silence, weighed down by anxiety. The mystery seemed to grow heavier with every step. Olivia pulled a dusty folder from an old archive, filled with adoption records from years past. The yellowed papers carried stories that had changed lives. Among names and dates, Hannah's breath caught as she noticed a coincidence: the record of a child surrendered on the very day of her own birth. The name of the biological mother was there, etched into history like a secret kept by time. Hannah's heart raced as she read, Grace Collins. The name pulsed before her eyes as if it were written in fire. Olivia's eyes widened in shock as she turned to her friend, realizing they had stumbled upon a forbidden revelation. The silence of the room seemed to vibrate with the weight of that discovery, as if even the walls knew its gravity. Hannah lifted her hand to her face, struggling to process the information. The housemaid, the woman who had stirred strange feelings of closeness within her, was the same name recorded in the files. Fate seemed to be playing with her life, stitching together threads that now began to align. The shock of the coincidence was impossible to deny. Olivia, ever practical, whispered that they needed to confirm this before taking action. But Hannah already felt the truth in her heart. The lullaby, the glances, the inexplicable bond, everything seemed to fit together now. It was as though the puzzle of her life was finally nearing completion. Outside, the rain grew heavier, adding to the tension and urgency of the moment. Hannah closed her eyes for an instant, taking a deep breath, her mind replaying every detail she had shared with Grace. It felt as though fabricated memories were beginning to give way to long-buried truths. Olivia squeezed her hand tightly, offering strength and solidarity. In that moment, Hannah knew she could no longer run. The forgotten name had been revealed, and with it came a new burden: to confront the past and face the present. The search for the truth was no longer a choice, it had become an inevitable path. Hannah could no longer bear the weight of her discoveries. With the folder in her hands and Grace's name etched into her mind, she decided to confront the only person who could confirm the truth. That night, she found Grace alone in the kitchen, quietly cleaning the sink. The young girl's heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo through the room. It was the moment she both feared and needed to face. With a trembling voice, Hannah called the housemaid by name. Grace turned slowly, surprised by the seriousness in the teenager's face. Hannah's gaze was filled with unshed tears, but also with determination. Then in one breath, she asked if the name written in the documents was hers, if Grace had truly given up a child for adoption on the same day she was born. Silence fell like an unbearable weight. Grace let the cloth slip from her hands, her eyes welling up instantly. Her body faltered as though her legs could not withstand the strength of that memory. With a trembling voice, she admitted it was true. That one day, with no choice, she had surrendered her newborn daughter because she had no means to raise her. Hannah felt her chest tighten. The words she had most feared now stood before her, cruel and undeniable. Grace wept, begging forgiveness, confessing that she had never known who adopted her daughter or where she had gone. But now she understood that fate had placed her in front of her child once more, sudden and merciless. The kitchen seemed too small to contain so much emotion. The hum of the refrigerator and the dripping faucet echoed like a bitter soundtrack to the revelation. Hannah, in shock, could not hold back her tears. It was as if all the loose fragments of her life had finally come together, but at the cost of unbearable pain. Grace tried to move closer but hesitated. Fear of losing her daughter once again froze her in place. Still, with courage, she lifted her hand, as though reaching for a fragment of her own soul lost to time. Her eyes pleaded not only for forgiveness, but for the chance to be seen as something more than the past that condemned her. Hannah, torn between anger and compassion, took a step back. The revelation burned like fire, scorching every certainty she had once known. She wanted to run, yet at the same time she needed to hear every word, needed confirmation that this was not just a nightmare. In that moment, there were no winners, only broken hearts. The truth finally revealed hovered between them like both a chasm and a bridge. Fate had reunited mother and daughter, but with a painful intensity that neither of them was prepared to endure. In the main living room, the tension was almost tangible. Jonathan and Catherine sat side by side on the sofa, unaware of the weight of the words they were about to hear. Hannah, standing before them, had tear-filled eyes and a trembling voice. Grace lingered by the door, hesitant as if she wished to disappear. Fate had gathered them all for the inevitable confrontation. With courage, Hannah broke the silence. She spoke of the documents, of the name found in the records, and finally revealed that Grace was her biological mother. The words fell like stones echoing through the room. Catherine covered her face in shock. Jonathan remained frozen for several seconds, as though trying to comprehend what he had just heard. Catherine was the first to react. Tears filled her eyes as she begged her daughter to understand. She confessed that she had never revealed the truth because she was afraid of losing Hannah's love. Her voice trembled thick with desperation. Each word was a confession of the fragility she had long hidden behind sweetness and constant protection. Jonathan, more rigid, drew a deep breath and rose to his feet. He looked at Hannah, then at Grace, his expression stern but not angry, rather powerless. He admitted he knew the secret could not last forever, but claimed he had done what he believed was best. His struggle to express emotion made the moment even heavier, as though every word carried unbearable weight. Hannah, overwhelmed with pain, demanded explanations. The ground beneath her seemed to crumble, and her anger mixed with a desperate desire for understanding. Her voice rang through the room like a stifled cry, accusing not only her adoptive parents' silence but also the destiny that had led her to this crossroads. It was a climax of irreconcilable emotions. Grace, in tears, tried to intervene. She insisted she never wished to cause harm, that she had never known who adopted her child, that the reunion was as unexpected for her as it was for everyone else. Her words were filled with humility and desperation, as though she sought to justify the unjustifiable. Her body trembled, but her eyes locked intensely on Hannah. The room felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in on them. Every word, every gesture, carried the weight of a silent battle between the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the present. Jonathan struggled to keep composure. Catherine wept, Grace pleaded, and Hannah stood at the center, torn between two worlds colliding brutally before her eyes. Finally, silence fell over them all, heavy and suffocating. The air itself seemed to recognize the weight of the revelation. Hannah, tears streaming down her face, knew nothing would ever be the same again. The secret had been laid bare, and the truths now crossed before her like roads that could never again be separated. The silence of the living room still echoed in Hannah's heart. The tears on her face had dried, but the emptiness remained. She looked at Grace and at Catherine as though forced to choose between two destinies. The weight of that decision seemed crushing, as if the entire world awaited her final word. Yet inside her, the conflict ran deeper than anyone could imagine. Catherine, her voice trembling, tried to come closer. She begged Hannah not to see her as an enemy, reminding her of all the nights she had stayed awake through fevers, of every quiet embrace, of every protective gesture. The fear of losing her daughter was visible in her tear-filled eyes. Yet alongside it was the sincerity of a love that had never depended on blood. On the other side, Grace remained silent, her hands clasped against her chest. Her body seemed shrunken, as if she wanted to disappear to avoid causing more pain, and yet her presence spoke volumes. In her tearful eyes there was humility and surrender. She did not want to fight for her daughter, only to see her happy, even if it meant stepping away. Hannah took deep breaths, trying to find strength. Memories flashed like lightning. The bedtime stories Catherine told, Jonathan's rigid advice, Grace's silent gazes, the lullaby that echoed like a forgotten memory. It was as if her life had been two parallel lines that now crossed in an inevitable collision. With a trembling voice, Hannah admitted she was confused, that she didn't know how to react. She confessed that her adoptive parents' lies had wounded her deeply, but she also recognized the undeniable love they had given her. At the same time, she admitted her heart ached to see Grace suffer, as though an invisible bond had always tied them together. Grace, summoning courage, broke the silence. She said she had no intention of taking Hannah from anyone, nor of destroying the family that had raised her. Her voice was steady yet heavy with pain. She only asked that her daughter move forward without hatred, for all she ever wanted was Hannah's happiness. The words fell like both a knife and an embrace. Catherine, overcome with emotion, looked at Grace for the first time without suspicion. There was pain in her eyes, but also compassion. It was as though she finally understood the battle was over, that both of them loved the same girl, in different yet equally powerful ways. The silence between them was no longer one of conflict, but of surrender. At the center of it all, Hannah closed her eyes and let the tears flow freely. She realized she didn't need to choose between one mother or the other. Love didn't divide, it multiplied. Yet her heart knew that embracing both in her life would forever alter the destiny of everyone around her. The weight of the choice gave Hannah no peace. That night, lying in her bed, Grace's words echoed in her mind, mixing with Catherine's gestures. Her teenage heart, torn between two mothers, could not accept separation. It was as if an invisible force pushed her toward what was inevitable, the reunion. The next morning, Hannah left home without a word. She walked along streets still wet from the rain, her coat pulled tight around her neck, her gaze lost in thought. Destiny led her to the small apartment where Grace lived. The modest building stood in sharp contrast to the comfort of the Reed home, and that contrast made her reflect on the two worlds that were now entwined. Grace was at the window, staring into nothing, when she heard a gentle knock at the door. Opening it, she found Hannah standing there, eyes glistening with tears and a timid smile. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Mother and daughter faced each other, bound by an energy neither could put into words. Hannah took a deep breath and said she didn't want to choose between one mother or the other, that her heart was big enough to love both. Grace brought her hands to her mouth, overwhelmed by the courage and maturity of her daughter. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of hope. They embraced tightly as though trying to recover all the years that had been stolen from them. Hannah pressed her face against Grace's shoulder, feeling the warmth of a love that had always been there, hidden yet alive. The embrace felt eternal, as if the entire world had vanished around them. Meanwhile, back at home, Catherine felt the emptiness of her daughter's absence. But within her also burned a spark of understanding. She knew Hannah needed this meeting to heal. Jonathan, more restrained, simply observed in silence, recognizing it was time to make space for the truth. Back at the apartment, Hannah held Grace's hands and asked her to return. She said there was no need to run, that love could be shared without destroying anything. The sincerity in her voice was like a balm to her biological mother, who finally believed destiny had given her a second chance. The reunion did not erase the pain of the past, but it opened a new possibility, to build a present where love had no boundaries. In that moment, Hannah realized she no longer needed to run from her origins. On the contrary, it was time to embrace them with all her strength. Night fell over the Reed household, bringing with it an air of expectation and tension. Hannah had made her decision. She wanted everyone together in the same space. She set the table with her own hands, arranging each plate as if the act itself could stitch broken hearts back together. This dinner was not just a meal. It was the stage for an inevitable destiny. Jonathan was the first to arrive at the table, silent. His impeccable suit contrasted with the stiffness of his posture, yet in his eyes there was something new, a timid willingness to yield. Catherine appeared soon after, helping Hannah arrange the silverware, her delicate gestures hiding her anxiety. Grace at last entered the room hesitantly, dressed simply, but with the dignity only a survivor of deep pain could carry. The atmosphere was suffocating at first. No one dared to break the silence, and the clinking of plates and cutlery echoed like hammers against the heart. Hannah observed every move, searching in their eyes for a sign that this gathering could work. The fear of failure was heavy, but her hope was greater still. It was Grace who found the courage to speak first. With a soft yet steady voice, she said she was not there to take Hannah from anyone. She declared that she recognized Jonathan and Catherine as the true parents, those who had given her daughter everything she could not. Her words, filled with humility, shattered the invisible barrier that suffocated the room. Catherine could not hold back her tears. She reached out her hand to Grace, and in that simple gesture conveyed everything her heart carried: gratitude, pain, forgiveness. With a trembling voice, she affirmed that family was made of love, not only of blood. The strength of her sincerity filled the space, dissolving the fear that had ruled her for so long. Jonathan, as restrained as ever, lifted his gaze and, for the first time, smiled at the situation. The smile was small, yet it carried meaning: acceptance, surrender, and even relief. His rigid posture finally seemed to soften, as if he understood that this dinner was more than words. It was a chance for a new beginning. Overcome with emotion, Hannah rose with a glass in her hands. Through tears and laughter, she declared that she had not gained only one truth but two mothers. Her firm yet gentle voice pierced through everyone's hearts, sealing the moment with the certainty that fate had not been cruel, but generous. The final scene showed them all raising their glasses together. Tears mingled with laughter as the once tense atmosphere transformed into relief and unity. The camera pulled back slowly, capturing that table as a symbol of a new family, built not just by blood but by the choice to love. Destiny, after all, had prepared this moment from the very beginning. And now I ask you, how many stories like Hannah's are still hidden in silence? How many truths could completely transform your life if they came to light today? The truth hurts, but it also sets you free. What are you keeping buried out of fear of facing it? Hannah discovered she didn't need to choose between one mother or the other, because love doesn't divide. It multiplies. And maybe that's your lesson too. Stop limiting your heart. How many times have you pushed someone away out of pride or missed out on something because you feared the pain? Destiny always finds a way to demand answers. If it were you in Hannah's place, would you be ready to hear the truth, even if it tore apart everything you thought you knew? Would you be prepared to forgive? Life, just like in this story, always sets the table with the people we need to face. The only difference is, will you run away or will you confront it? And that's exactly why I want you to subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications. Here you'll find stories that touch your heart, provoke deep reflections, and show you that, in the end, destiny always has something to teach us. Don't wait until later. The next episode might be the one that changes the way you see life.